Before Judge Caprio, I stood accused of a crime. My offense? Transforming a neglected patch of dirt into a vibrant garden, a living memorial to the woman I loved. The wood of the defendant's table felt unnervingly smooth beneath my trembling fingers. It was polished to a high shine, reflecting the sterile fluorescent lights of the courtroom overhead. Everything in here felt cold, official, and a million miles away from the rich, dark soil I was used to. My hands, usually caked with dirt and stained with chlorophyll, were scrubbed raw but still felt out of place. On one side of me was a public defender who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, and in front of me, sitting on a throne of civic authority, was Judge Frank Caprio. I'd seen him on TV, of course. Everyone in Providence had. He was famous for his compassion, for finding the human story behind the citation. But as his dark, intelligent eyes scanned the file in front of him, I felt a knot of pure dread tighten in my stomach. Compassion felt like a fairy tale, right now. My crime? The official charge, read out by a bored-looking prosecutor, was unauthorized cultivation on public land and violation of city beautification ordinances. It sounded like I'd started some kind of illegal farming operation. What I had actually done was plant flowers. That was it. I'd turned a miserable, trash-strewn patch of dirt on the corner of Elm Street into a garden. It was a triangle of land the city had forgotten, wedged between a crumbling brick wall and a bus stop. For years it was a graveyard for fast food wrappers, discarded lottery tickets, and the occasional lost shoe. It was an eyesore, a patch of urban sadness, and every day I had to walk past it. Every day it felt like a small personal failure. So I did something about it. I'm a gardener. It's what I do. It's what I am. I run a small landscaping business, just me and my beat-up Ford Ranger. I don't have much, but I have a strong back and a deep, unshakable belief that there's no patch of earth that can't be made beautiful. One Saturday, I'd had enough. I took my own tools, my own compost, and a few flats of marigolds, zinnias, and lavender that I'd paid for myself. I spent 10 hours on my hands and knees. I pulled out weeds that were as thick as my wrist, cleared away bags and bags of garbage, and tilled the soil until it was soft and breathing again. It felt good. It felt right. I wasn't just cleaning up a mess, I was bringing something back to life. I was making a promise. People noticed. The next morning, a woman at the bus stop smiled at me. A real, genuine smile. A few days later, someone had left a little painted rock with a ladybug on it tucked between the flowers. Kids would point at the butterflies that started to visit. The little corner of blight became a small pocket of joy. I kept it up. I added perennials, lilies, black-eyed Susans, and a small climbing rose I trained up the brick wall. It was my little secret project, my gift to a neighborhood that could use a splash of color. I never asked for a penny. I never put up a sign with my name on it. The happiness it brought was the only payment I needed. And then came Brenda Gable. She lived in the apartment building across the street, her window a perfect perch for judgment. I saw her watching me sometimes, her face pinched into a permanent scowl. One afternoon she marched across the street, a clipboard clutched in her hand like a weapon. "Do you have a permit for this?" she'd snapped, her voice as sharp as pruning shears. I was on my knees, gently planting a row of forget-me-nots. I remember looking up at her, blinking in the sun. "A permit? For flowers?" She tapped her clipboard. "This is city property. You are in violation of Ordinance 3B, subsection C, unauthorized alteration of public grounds. This is a liability. What if someone is allergic to this pollen?" Aiki, she waved a dismissive hand at the garden, at my work, as if it were a pile of toxic waste. I tried to explain, to tell her to just look at it, to see the good it was doing. She wasn't interested. She was interested in rules. A week later, the citation arrived in the mail. Now, here I was, facing a $200 fine and a potential order to rip out every last petal and return the corner to its former state of miserable neglect. The prosecutor droned on, presenting his evidence. It was a series of photographs. He held up the first one. It was a picture of the corner from before I started. It was bleak, gray, and littered with trash. "This," he announced, "is the city-approved state of the property." Then he held up a second photo. It was a picture of my garden in full, glorious bloom. Colors exploded from the frame. Bees were visible, hovering over the lavender. It was beautiful. It was alive. "And this," the prosecutor said with a voice dripping with disdain, "is the unauthorized modification. A chaotic, unregulated floral display." The courtroom was silent. I could feel the public defender sigh next to me. Judge Caprio leaned forward, steepling his fingers. He ignored the prosecutor and looked directly at the photograph of the garden. He stared at it for a long, quiet moment, his expression unreadable. My heart was pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. He looked from the picture to me, and his gaze was so intense it felt like he was looking right through my skin, right into the reason I was there. He wasn't looking at me like a criminal. He was looking at me like a puzzle he needed to solve. "Mr. Rossi," he said, his voice quiet, but carrying through the entire room. "I'm looking at this photograph. There are many different flowers here. Lilies, roses, zinnias. They're all beautiful." He paused, picking up the photo and holding it closer. "But I see one type of flower here more than any other, all along the border. These small, blue ones. Forget-me-nots. Was there a particular reason for that choice, son?" The question hung in the air, heavy and unexpected. Forget-me-nots. He'd noticed. Of all the details, of all the legal jargon and ordinance numbers, he'd seen the tiny blue flowers. I swallowed hard, the sound loud in the quiet room. My public defender shifted beside me, probably thinking this was some strange judicial test I was about to fail. My throat felt like it was closing up, and for a second, I couldn't find my voice. I looked down at my hands, at the faint lines of dirt still etched around my fingernails, a permanent reminder of my life's work. My wife used to call them my love lines. They were her favorite, I finally managed to say, my voice raspy and low. I cleared my throat and tried again, looking up to meet the judge's steady gaze. My wife's, Elena. They were her favorite flower. The name felt strange on my lips in this cold, sterile place. Elena was a name that belonged in a garden, full of sunlight and life, not echoing off polished wood and cinder-block walls. Judge Caprio didn't say anything. He just watched me, his expression patient, giving me the space to continue. He wasn't rushing me. He was listening. "She passed away 2 years ago," I said, the words still feeling like a punch to the gut, even after all this time. "Cancer. It was fast." I took a shaky breath, the memory of the hospital, of its antiseptic smell and beeping machines, threatening to overwhelm me. That corner, the one where I planted the garden, that's where I met her. 42 years ago. I was just a kid, really, waiting for the bus to my first job with a landscaping crew. I was so nervous, and she was there, waiting for the same bus. She was reading a book of poetry, and she had a daisy tucked behind her ear. A small, sad smile touched my lips without my permission. I was a clumsy oaf. I tripped over my own feet and sent my lunchbox flying. An apple rolled right to her shoes. She looked up and laughed. It was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. She said, "Looks like you're trying to give me an apple for the teacher." And that was it. I was gone. We rode the bus together that day, and every day after that. We got married, had 2 kids, built a life. But it all started right there, on that ugly patch of dirt. I glanced over at the prosecutor's table. Across the aisle I could see Brenda Gable, the woman who'd made the complaint. She rolled her eyes and whispered something to the man beside her, her face a mask of annoyed impatience. She wasn't seeing a love story. She was seeing a delay. My jaw tightened, but I forced myself to look back at the judge. He hadn't taken his eyes off me. "After Eleanor was gone," I continued, my voice growing stronger, fueled by the memory of her, "the whole world felt gray, colorless. Every day I'd walk past that corner on my way to the hardware store or the market, and all I could see was the trash, the weeds. It felt disrespectful. To her memory, to the memory of what happened there. Eleanor always hated that spot. She'd say, 'Frankie, it's such a sad little piece of ground. Someone should plant flowers there, something to make people smile when they're waiting for the bus.' She always saw the potential in things, in people, in patches of dirt. So that's what I did. I was just trying to do what she would have wanted. I was trying to bring a little bit of her back, a little bit of color into the gray. I chose the perennials, the lilies, the roses, because they were her favorites for bouquets. But the forget-me-nots, I planted those for me, a whole border of them, so that every time I walked by, I would be reminded of that first day, so I wouldn't forget. So maybe the neighborhood wouldn't forget that something beautiful can start in a place everyone else has given up on." The courtroom was utterly still. The air was thick with unspoken emotion. My public defender was staring at me, his mouth slightly agape. I saw a woman in the gallery behind the prosecutor quickly wipe a tear from her eye. Judge Caprio slowly took off his reading glasses and placed them on the file in front of him. He rubbed his eyes, and when he looked back up, his expression had softened completely. The judge was gone. For a moment, it was just a man, listening to another man's story of love and loss. The knot of dread in my stomach began to loosen, replaced by a fragile flicker of hope. He understood. He cleared his throat. "Mr. Rossi," he began, his voice softer now. He then turned his gaze from me and locked it onto the city prosecutor, who had been shuffling his papers, trying to look busy. "Counselor," Judge Caprio said, his voice regaining its judicial authority, "I have a question for you. You presented a photograph of this property in its city-approved state, covered in litter and weeds. Can you please provide the court with the city's maintenance records for this specific parcel of land for the past 5 years? I'd like to see a full accounting of what the city has spent in terms of man-hours and funds to maintain its approved state of urban blight." The prosecutor froze, his hand hovering over a stack of files. His face went through a rapid series of emotions, first confusion, then a flicker of panic, and finally settling on a sort of flustered indignation. "Your Honor," he stammered, I don't have those records with me. This is a simple ordinance violation case. The maintenance schedule for that particular parcel it's not relevant to the charge." He shuffled his papers again, the rustling sound echoing loudly in the silent room. He was trying to project confidence, but a sheen of sweat was beginning to form on his upper lip. Judge Caprio leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowed slightly. He wasn't angry. He was something far more intimidating. He was dissecting the situation with surgical precision. "Not relevant?" he repeated, his voice dangerously calm. "Counselor, you are here on behalf of the city, arguing that Mr. Rossi's unauthorized beautification project is a problem that requires a financial penalty and a court order to destroy his work. You present this court with a photograph of a neglected, trash-strewn lot and call it city-approved. I am now asking you to show me the city's approval. Show me the receipts. Show me the proof that the city has been a responsible steward of this land. Because if you can't, then you're not just prosecuting a man for planting flowers. You're prosecuting him for doing the job the city failed to do." The prosecutor opened his mouth, then closed it again. He looked helplessly towards Brenda Gable in the gallery, who just glared back, her arms crossed tightly over her chest as if to physically hold her righteousness in place. He had no answer. There were no records, and we both knew it. That patch of land was a bureaucratic orphan, a line item on a map that hadn't seen a city lawnmower or a garbage crew in a decade. My little garden wasn't a violation of their beautification plan. It was the beautification plan. Judge Caprio turned his attention back to me. "Mr. Rossi, how much money have you spent on this project?" I had never really thought about it in those terms. It wasn't an expense, it was just something I did. "I'm not sure, Your Honor. Maybe $300 or $400 over the last year. For the soil, the seeds, some of the perennials. I propagated a lot of them myself from my own garden." "And your time?" he pressed. "How many hours would you say you've dedicated to this?" I did a quick mental calculation, the initial 10-hour cleanup, and then at least 2 or 3 hours every week, weeding, watering, planting new things for the season. "At least 100 hours, sir. Probably more." The judge nodded slowly, absorbing the information. He looked down at the citation in his hand. "A $200 fine," he mused, almost to himself. "So, the city's position is that this man, who has invested hundreds of dollars of his own money and over 100 hours of his own labor to single-handedly transform a public eyesore into a community asset, a place of beauty and remembrance, owes the city an additional $200 for his trouble." He let the statement hang in the air, its absurdity palpable. He then turned his gaze toward the back of the courtroom, to the complainant. "Miss Gable, would you please approach the bench?" Brenda Gable stood up, a look of vindicated triumph on her face. This was it. The judge was finally going to listen to the voice of reason, the voice of the rules. She strode to the front, her sensible shoes making loud, officious clicks on the linoleum floor. She stood beside the prosecutor's table, her posture ramrod straight. "Yes, Your Honor?" "Ma'am, you are the citizen who filed this complaint against Mr. Rossi, is that correct?" "Yes, I am," she said, her voice sharp and clear. "It's my civic duty to report violations. The law is the law." "I see," the judge said, his expression unreadable. "And your primary concern, as you stated to the reporting officer, was the potential for unregulated pollen and the chaotic nature of the planting. Is that a fair summary?" "And the liability issue," she added quickly. "What if a child tripped over one of his little unauthorized rocks? The city would be sued. It's a matter of public safety and order. I looked over at the photo of the garden, at the smiling ladybug rock someone had left, and my heart ached. Public order, Judge Caprio repeated softly. He tapped the photo of the garden. Does this look like a threat to public order to you, ma'am? Brenda squinted at the photo. It's messy. It's not uniform. A proper city planting would be in neat rows. Probably just bushes. Something low maintenance. This is an amateurish mess. Her words were like little darts, each one piercing the love and care I had poured into that soil. Amateurish, the judge echoed. He was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. Miss Gable, I have just one more question for you. Mr. Rossi has created something that many people in the neighborhood clearly find beautiful. He did it for a deeply personal reason, to honor his late wife. He did it at no cost to the city, using his own time and his own money. My question is this. Why does it bother you so much? Brenda Gable's face hardened, the self-righteous facade cracking just a little. Her eyes darted from the judge to me, then back again. A flicker of something raw and ugly passed through them. Because it's not right, she snapped, her voice rising. People can't just go around doing whatever they want. There are rules. I follow the rules. Everyone should follow the rules. He thinks he's so special, making his little shrine. Well, the world doesn't need more shrines. It needs more... She trailed off, searching for the word. Judge Caprio waited, his gaze unwavering. It needs more what, Miss Gable? He prompted gently. She took a deep breath, her hands clenching into fists at her side, and the words that came out next stunned the entire courtroom into silence. It needs more parking. Parking. The word dropped into the profound silence of the courtroom like a stone in a well. It was so petty, so jarringly out of place with the emotions of the last few minutes, that it took a moment for everyone to process it. My public defender, who had been looking at me with a newfound respect, now turned to stare at Brenda Gable with sheer disbelief. The woman in the gallery, who had been crying, actually let out a small, audible gasp. Parking. All this, the citation, the court date, the threat of having to tear down my memorial to Elena, was about parking. Judge Caprio didn't react at first. He just looked at Brenda, letting her absurd declaration hang in the air and suffocate her. Her face was flushed, a blotchy red creeping up her neck. She must have realized how it sounded, because she started to backtrack, tripping over her words. Well, I mean, it's not just about the parking. It's the principle. But that corner, it's wasted space. It's been empty for years. It could be paved. For resident permit parking. We're always short on spaces. It would be a practical, logical use of city land. Not this. She gestured dismissively toward the photograph of the garden, her hand waving away the lilies and roses as if they were nothing more than weeds. So, your complaint about pollen, liability, and the chaotic nature of the flowers was, in fact, secondary to your desire to have this land converted into a parking lot, Judge Caprio stated. It wasn't a question. It was a conclusion. Well, Brenda stammered, flustered. All those things are still true, but the parking is also a valid concern for the community. The judge's gaze was like ice. Ms. Gable, the court has heard the testimony of Mr. Rossi. We have learned that this small piece of land is where he met his wife of over 40 years. We've learned that he has spent his own time and money to build a living tribute to her memory, transforming a neglected public space into a place of beauty that has brought joy to your shared neighborhood. And your response to this act of love, grief, and community service is to demand that it be paved over to make room for one, maybe two, extra parking spaces. He let his words sink in, then turned his full attention back to the city prosecutor. The prosecutor looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. Counselor, the judge's voice was sharp now, cutting through the tension. You brought this case here today. You stood before this court and argued that Mr. Rossi's garden was a chaotic, unregulated floral display. Were you aware that the primary motivation of the complainant was to destroy this garden to create a parking space? The prosecutor paled. Your Honor, the complainant's motivations are not my concern. I am here to prosecute a violation of a city ordinance, that's all. That's all, Judge Caprio shot back, his voice rising for the first time. Is that really all, Counselor? Or is it your job to apply the law with a measure of reason and discretion? Did you, or anyone from your office, visit this unregulated floral display? The prosecutor shifted his weight from one foot to the other. A code enforcement officer visited the site, Your Honor. I have his report. I'm not asking about a code enforcement officer. I'm asking about you. Did you go and see what you were asking this court to destroy? Did you speak to any of the neighbors other than Miss Gable to see if this garden was, in fact, a nuisance? The answer was written all over the prosecutor's face. No, Your Honor. So you took the word of one citizen, whose motives now appear to be based on a personal desire for a parking space, and you dragged a 68-year-old widower into court. You threatened him with fines and demanded he dismantle a memorial to his deceased wife, all without ever bothering to take 10 minutes out of your day to see the truth of the situation for yourself. Is that a fair summary of the city's handling of this case? The prosecutor stared down at his shoes, utterly defeated. Your Honor, he began, but no other words came. Judge Caprio shook his head slowly, a look of profound disappointment on his face. He picked up the citation from his desk, holding it between his thumb and forefinger, as if it were a piece of trash. This is not justice, he said, his voice low and firm. This is a perversion of the law. The law is meant to serve the people, not to be used as a weapon to settle petty grievances, or to punish citizens for acts of kindness. He looked directly at me, and his eyes were filled with a warmth that felt like the sun after a long winter. Mr. Rossi, what you have done is not a crime. It is a gift to your neighborhood, and a testament to a love that has clearly not faded with time. He then looked at the photo of my garden one last time, a gentle smile playing on his lips. It is the judgment of this court, he announced, his voice ringing with authority, that this case is dismissed with prejudice. A wave of relief so powerful it almost buckled my knees washed over me. Tears I hadn't even realized were forming started to well up in my eyes. It was over. But Judge Caprio wasn't finished. He held up a hand to silence the murmurs that had started in the gallery. Furthermore, he said, his eyes locking back onto the city prosecutor, I am not just dismissing the case against Mr. Rossi. I am issuing a new court order, right now. Counselor, I suggest you take this down. The prosecutor fumbled for a pen, his movements clumsy with shock. The entire courtroom leaned forward, a collective holding of breath. What kind of order could a traffic court judge possibly issue in a case like this? Judge Caprio looked down at his notes, but I knew he wasn't reading. The words were coming from a place of deep conviction. First, he declared, his voice resonating with a finality that left no room for argument, the City of Providence is hereby ordered to place a permanent moratorium on any and all development, alteration, or paving of the parcel of land located at the corner of Elm Street, Assessor's Plat 22, Lot 418. That land is to remain a public garden space in perpetuity. My jaw dropped. In perpetuity. Forever. It wasn't just a reprieve, it was a promise. Brenda Gable let out a strangled noise of protest, a sound like a deflating balloon, but one sharp glare from the judge silenced her immediately. He wasn't done. Second, he continued, pointing his pen at the prosecutor, the Department of Public Works is ordered to assist Mr. Rossi in the garden's upkeep. Effective immediately, the city will provide a water hookup at the site at the city's expense, so this man no longer has to haul buckets from his home. They will also provide a seasonal delivery of mulch and compost, as requested by Mr. Rossi. He will be the sole official steward of this garden, but the city will provide the basic materials it should have been providing all along. He paused, letting the weight of his orders settle. He was turning my act of guerrilla gardening into an official, city-sanctioned park. A park named in my heart for my Elena. Tears were now streaming freely down my face, not of sadness, but of a profound, overwhelming gratitude that I hadn't felt in years. I looked at my public defender, and he was smiling, a wide, genuine grin that transformed his weary face. Third, the judge said, and this time he looked directly at me, his expression softening once more. The $200 fine cited in this case is, of course, waived. Instead, the City of Providence is ordered to pay Mr. Rossi a stipend of $200 for the materials he has already purchased. Consider it a retroactive grant for civic beautification. He then looked back at the prosecutor. And as for the complaint itself, I am fining the complainant, Miss Gable, $100 for misuse of public resources. That fine will be paid directly to the Providence Parks Conservancy to fund other community gardens. Brenda Gable's face went white with fury. She opened her mouth to argue, but the judge cut her off with a simple, powerful word. Done. He banged his gavel, the sound echoing like a thunderclap. This court is adjourned. And just like that, it was over. The prosecutor gathered his files in a daze, avoiding everyone's eyes. Brenda Gable stormed out of the courtroom, muttering under her breath about appeals and writing to the mayor. But no one was paying attention to her. The gallery erupted in quiet applause. People I'd never met came up to me, patting me on the shoulder, shaking my hand, telling me how much they loved the garden. The woman who had been crying came over and gave me a hug. My husband loved lilies, she whispered. Thank you. My public defender helped me gather my things. I've been doing this for 15 years, Frank, he said, calling me by my first name. And that was the most beautiful thing I have ever seen in a courtroom. I could only nod, my throat too tight with emotion to speak. As I walked out into the hallway, a court officer stopped me. Judge Caprio would like a word with you in his chambers, Mr. Rossi, if you have a moment. My heart skipped a beat. I followed the officer down a quiet hall to a simple office. Judge Caprio was standing by the window, his black robe off, looking like just another man. Come in, Frank, he said, gesturing to a chair. I just wanted to tell you something in private. I sat down, my old bones weary from the emotional roller coaster. What you did with that garden, it's a powerful thing, he said. My own mother, God rest her soul, came to this country with nothing. Her one joy was a small window box where she grew basil and tomatoes. She always said, to grow something is to believe in tomorrow. You've given that corner a tomorrow. He walked over to his desk and picked up something small. I'm not supposed to do this, he said with a conspiratorial smile, but this is from the evidence file. I think it belongs with you. He handed me the little painted ladybug rock. I closed my hand around it, its smooth, cool surface a comfort. Thank you, Judge, I said, my voice thick. Thank you for everything. You didn't just save my garden. You saw her. You saw Elena in it. He nodded, his eyes kind. Love like that doesn't die, Frank. It just finds new ways to grow. I left the courthouse and walked out into the bright afternoon sun. The world felt different. The gray had lifted. I walked a few blocks to Elm Street, my steps lighter than they had been in years. And there it was. My garden. Elena's garden. It was blazing with color, alive with bees and butterflies. A young couple was sitting on the low brick wall, holding hands. A little boy was pointing at the black-eyed Susans, his mother smiling down at him. It was a pocket of joy, a testament to a love that had started right here, on this little patch of earth. I knelt down, my knees complaining, and carefully placed the painted ladybug rock right at the front, nestled among the border of small, blue forget-me-nots. I could almost hear Eleanor's laugh on the breeze, telling me she knew I'd get it right eventually. And as I worked the rich soil with my hands, I knew I wasn't just tending to flowers. I was tending to a promise, and I was believing in tomorrow.